You're wasting absolutely hours of your life if you're making one or more of these 5 key mixing mistakes. And with this newfound time, you'll be able to do any number of wonderful things, like be able to write a new song about hope or heartbreak or houseplants, instead of endlessly tweaking your hi-hat panning for a song that no one but your dog has heard. Or you could take a walk, touch grass, remember what sunlight feels like after you leave the gloom of your DAW cave. I'm just kidding, sunlight's a myth. Or, I dare say, finish that album you've been working on since the Obama administration. Fast and Furious, you are not. By the way, one thing that's really gonna help you avoid all these mistakes is my free mixing checklist, which you can grab in the description below, or you can go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/mixing checklist, and this will walk you through a proven step-by-step system on how to actually go about mixing your songs so they sound clean, professional, and amazing each and every time, and you can cut out all the fluff and stop wasting your time. So again, this is completely free. Grab it in the description below. Sorry if I'm being annoying and weird. I do have 5 children, and my wife and I homeschool them, so they're always home, and sleep is also a myth. All right, enough rambling. Let's get to the tips. So mistake number 1 is not using reference tracks. You need to be using references, my dear friend, my dear viewer. Reference. So reference track is simply a professional song that's already been released into the world that you want your music to sound like. So you can import that into your DAW, and there's a couple things you want to reference for. So number 1, you want to reference for like style, genre. So if you want to find a song that has similar instrumentation to yours, so you can kind of get a good picture there. Another type of reference is just overall just quality. Maybe you want to get like a modern song, even if you don't create like a modern style, just so you can know, hey, here's what is considered state-of-the-art quality, and you can kind of get an idea of, okay, how does mine stack up to that? And then another thing is getting a track that just sounds similar in terms of like tone or arrangement. And so you can use reference tracks while you're writing as well as while you're mixing. So this is actually something I hear, not many people talking about. They will talk about reference for mixing, but also, it's great to use them for arranging. So you can even just like copy the arrangement. So you can be like, okay, so their verses are this many bars, then there comes a pre-chorus, then, oh, they have a little interlude here, then they have this many choruses. And so you can kind of follow that arrangement and start to really learn how to go about structuring your songs. So writing songs or mixing songs without reference tracks is kind of like playing archery with a blindfold on and you don't know where the target is. So you're just kind of shooting blindly in the dark, which is not great for your archery score or for any bystanders. And this is something that's done all the time, even by professionals, right? When I was learning and basically apprenticing in college at audio engineering school, I was working in a pro commercial recording studio, and before my mentor who owned the studio worked with any bands, he would ask them like, who do you want to sound like? What are the songs that you like that you want to sound like? And then he would listen to those songs and get ideas on how, okay, this is how the snare should sound, or this is how the guitar should sound, the vocal, so on. So it gives you a target that you are aiming at. Otherwise, you're going to, again, be kind of lost in the dark. If you like that tip, go ahead and hit that like button right now. Now, second common mixing mistake is mixing too loud. Believe it or not, you actually want to mix at a pretty quiet volume level, basically at the level where you can carry on a conversation with someone else in the room without having to really raise your voice or turn down the music. So why this is because if you mix too loud, if you're listening back to your music too loud while you're mixing, you're going to rapidly increase the rate at which you experience listening fatigue. And that is where your ears get tired and you're not able to make objective mixing decisions while you're listening back to your track. In other words, even if you're a great mixer, you're going to start making bad decisions and not mixing as well the longer you go on listening at those loud levels, the longer you go mixing. And this is why you can think a song is okay, then you come back to it later and you're like, what the heck happened? You're losing that objectivity. And so you only want to listen loud, like at 85 to 90 decibels, when you are using EQ. And this is because of the Fletcher-Munson curve, which shows how the human ear's response to different frequencies at different volume points is not linear. This is why you can be listening to a song at a low volume level and you're like, where's the bass? There's no bass. And then you have to turn it up to actually hear the bass, because if you look at the Fletcher-Munson curve here, you can see at low volume levels, the bass frequencies really slide off. And so Fletcher-Munson discovered that at about 85 to 90 decibels is the closest the human ear gets to being linear, but it's never quite linear. In other words, you would think at a certain volume level, you hear all frequencies at the same clarity level, you experience them at the same volume level, but that's not true. At certain volumes, different frequencies are more or less loud to our human ears. So when you're using EQ and you're actually making decisions on how much volume should be in certain frequencies, that's when you want to mix loud, 85 to 90 dB. The rest of the time you're using compression, or automation, effects, anything else, listen at that lower dB level where you can still carry on a conversation with someone else in the room without raising your voice. Now, mixing mistake number 3, and this is going to really blow some people's minds. It's very counterintuitive. And the mistake is mixing too slowly. You might think it's the other way around and that people are rushing and mixing too fast, and that's leading to mistakes. No, it's actually usually the opposite. And you're spending too much time mixing. And this runs into a lot of the same problems as mixing too loud. You get mixing fatigue. Anytime you go to mix a track, you are literally on the clock. And the longer you take to mix that song, the less good it's going to sound, the less objective you're going to be. So you want to be mixing quickly. And this is what you see the professionals doing. They are mixing quickly. They're not spending hours listening to the same snare sample over and over again and tweaking that EQ. The other problem with mixing too slowly is you're probably getting bogged down on things that don't really matter and adjusting stuff that no one's really going to hear, or getting lost trying to perform some technique you watched in a YouTube video and that may or may not be relevant for you and your particular song. So what you really want to embrace when you are mixing is the 80-20 principle, or Pareto's principle, which is this ubiquitous law of the universe or nature that says across basically all fields, 80% of your results or 80% of your outputs follow 20% of your efforts or inputs. In other words, of all the things you could be doing to mix your track, there's really only 20%. There's only 20% of those tasks that you want to focus on. That's going to get you 80% of the way to sounding professional, which for most people, 80%, right? The lay person is going to sound amazing and professional. It's only the audio snobs and the mixing engineers and people like that that might be like, oh, I noticed this or I noticed that, because there's tons of great songs out there on Spotify that get tons of streams that you would probably say is not the best mix. So if you can stop wasting your time and only focus on those 20% of tasks that are going to get you 80% of the way there, and then you can have some time left over to get the extra, 90 to 100% of the way there later after that. But if you're wasting so much of your time on all these other things and mixing too slowly, you're probably never even going to get to 80%, let alone 100%, which is probably why you have so many songs sitting on your hard drive that are not finished and not released. Now, speaking of all this, I am launching a 5-day effortless music challenge where you can join me live every day, 1 hour a day for an entire week, 5 days, and I will walk you through how to go about writing songs faster, mixing songs faster, and share with you ninja workflow and production tips so that you can actually start producing pro quality music you are proud of faster than ever, so you can release more songs than ever and have your friends and family be absolutely blown away. Or if you are trying to actually build a music career, now you can actually get to the point where you're releasing like every 4 to 6 weeks, you're putting out a new single, like artists like Nick D do, or like my friend Jen does, who have millions and millions of monthly listeners. Because if you've been paying attention to how to actually grow your streams, this is what the algorithms want. They want consistent content, and you want to build that momentum. You need to be releasing music consistently and frequently. And when I say that, a lot of people come back at me, well, then my quality is going to suffer because I can't produce songs that fast. Well, this is the solution for you, this 5-day challenge, because not only will you produce more music than ever, faster than ever, but it will be the best quality. So if you want to really light speed your learning curve and learn music production faster than ever, then definitely sign up for this challenge. I'll have it linked below, or you can go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/EMC. All right, mixing mistake number 4 is over processing. And this is kind of dovetailing with our previous mistake that is a common mistake. So over processing is just adding plugin after plugin because you think that's what you're supposed to do. And a lot of times you are going to want to say add compression to every track or EQ to every track, but not necessarily. Now, when I worked again in that commercial recording studio, we were recording a lot of live artists. We're doing live drums, we're doing guitars, instruments in a room environment with a bunch of microphones set up. And so whenever we would go to mix in the DAW, and when I watched my instructor mix, he would instantly put a compressor on every track. It was the Waves R compressor, if you're curious. That was his favorite compressor. And he'd put that on every single track, and that made sense because he's recording live instruments, and every live instrument is probably going to need some kind of compression. But when you are using samples, when you're using digital synths and you're mixing in a DAW completely, there might be stuff that doesn't need compression. There might be stuff that doesn't really need a whole lot of EQ. So don't just add plugins because you think you're supposed to. You really use your ears, trust your ears, and you might find that using fewer plugins actually makes your mix better. Now, another way to avoid overprocessing is not mixing from the bottom up and starting with all your individual tracks first, but actually mixing top down, where you start with your mix bus first, apply processing across all of your tracks, and then from there you work on your groups. So like your drum group, your bass group, maybe you have a mids group, vocal, so on. So that way, when you get to the individual track level, you might find, I don't really need to add anything to my hi-hats because bus processing and the drum group processing already kind of handled everything. And so that's going to save you time. It's going to save you from getting bogged down, losing objectivity, and also your computer CPU will thank you. So don't be over processing. And then mixing mistake number 5 is not achieving a good initial balance before diving into the mixing stuff. And so again, going back to that 80-20 rule, this is probably like 60% of mixing, because if you 80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule, you get another fraction. Sorry, there's so much math that is also kind of true. And that is the 64-4 rule, which is just the 80-20 rule applied again to itself, where a lot of times like 64% of your results come from only 4% of your efforts. So if you could double down on that, right? What's the 4% of all the mixing stuff that if you could really focus on that, it would get you 64% of the way to your mix sounding good. And that is the initial volume balance, the gain staging, maybe your initial panning, your static mix. So really always do that first. So before you dive into adding plugins or mixing, turn all your volume faders down and start moving them up one by one. There's a couple different strategies for this. You can have order of importance. So you start with your lead vocal, put that at like 0, and then you balance everything to that. Another rule of thought is you start with your lower frequency instruments first, like your bass, your drums, everything, and then you add everything in, because you tend to always make the last thing you're working on the loudest because you're working on that. And so by default, you'll end up with your vocal being the loudest if you work on that at the end. It's really just workflow preference. So whichever one you like and works for you, do that. But the point here is starting with that good volume balance first, making sure you're gain staging correctly. This is something I had no clue of when I was getting started. And that is whenever you're adding a plugin to something, make sure the output volume level is the same as it was going into the plugin. You're not adding gain, you're not adding volume. And so just by following these foundational things, you're going to, again, get your mix to sounding 60% of the way there in just 4% of the time. That's going to massively increase your speed and your quality. So again, if you really want to help with all of this and actually implementing it so you can light speed your music production learning curve, then definitely sign up for my 5-day Effortless Music Challenge. You can see this is what you'll get over 5 days as we'll show up together in a live video room, and I'll teach you, and you can ask me questions, and this will really help you get to the point where you're able to produce your best quality music faster than ever. So day 1, you're going to learn why fast music producers are the best music producers. Day 2, you're going to learn how to craft songs that practically write themselves, even if you don't know music theory or how to play an instrument. Day 3, we're going to cover the self-mixing song system, also what I call my backtrack mixing mechanism, which will show you how to, again, set up a system that basically mixes your songs for you and makes your life so much easier and saves you so much time and helps you create better songs than ever. Day 4 is going to cover some ninja secrets of fast creators. So we're going to look at real life examples of different music artists and what techniques they're using to produce high quality music quickly. And then finally, we're going to put it all together on day 5 and build your effortless music machine so you can finally fully express yourself, get the music that's in your head out into the world, or even start publishing more music so you can grow your fan base. Now, this is a live challenge that will be August 18th through the 22nd. If you're watching this after those dates, then I'll probably have a wait list for the next one, so you can sign up for that. Otherwise, if you are watching this in the present before those dates, then definitely sign up before that happens so you can get in on this live challenge. I'll have a link in the description below, or you can go to orpheusaudioacademy.com/EMC. Those are 5 mixing mistakes. Now, if you want to know the real reason why you're not actually finishing more music and it's not sounding the way you want it to, don't worry, it's not your fault. I break it all down in another video on my channel, which you can click on the screen right now.